What is up? What is up, spiritual dope? Today we are going to talk about this word numinous. We're going to talk about this word numinous, and we're going to start off just like this. We're going to jump right into it, and we're going to say your entire life experience can most likely be summed up in a couple of words. You probably have just a few words that you would use to convey the entirety of it. And at most, you'll refer to specific moments in time, seasons, segments of the whole. What will you fill those moments with? Is it possible for you to fill them up with a story of how they were? Are the stories flat, draw, without any true depth, like a pothole versus a lake, right? Oftentimes you feel slightly detached, and sometimes you may feel powerless or overwhelmed, and you feel as though the universe is swallowing you whole without even taking a moment to savor the delightful dish. And you feel like this, oblivious to any onlooker, yet you have a desire. You have a knowing. There are moments in your seasons that sometimes they just don't make the cover notes of your story. There have been moments in your life where you're completely in tune with who you are, seemingly in sync with all of the universe. I'd like to think that maybe it's a moment where you sing along to your favorite song and your heart pulses in a different frequency. A surge of what it feels like, and love emotes from your entire body. Maybe it was you were dancing, and as the night was pure magic, you danced through the entire evening, and each move was a release of pure energy that moved your body in line with the cosmos. It could be as simple as a revelation, like a moment I had like in jiu-jitsu. It's just a tiny inhale that expands your chest. It's just so I can able to finish up the choke. Moments like this have certainly been they've been considered being in flow, a term that was coined by psychologist Mihaly. I'm gonna jack up his last name, Mihaly, whatever. Look, if you look up flow, you'll find this guy Mihaly, and it describes optimal experience. He says that during flow, people typically experience deep enjoyment, creativity, and a total involvement with life. Now, I'm going to use the word numinous in kind of like tandem with flow and that feeling. And numinous means, according to Merriam-Webster, it's supernatural, filled with a sense of the presence of divinity or holy, or appealing to the higher emotions or to the aesthetic sense, spiritual. And the word derived from the Latin word numen, meaning divine will, or nod. It suggests a figurative nodding or the assent or of command of the divine head. This is a state of being that can be mimicked by drug use or drinking, or just pure intoxication. Mimicked, right? In short, going out of your mind, so that you're able to experience yourself. And I like to segment those two words, yourself, because they in this context it's two different pieces. And look, intoxication is not sustainable, and it's certainly fraught with its own sets of dangers. And in truth, ask me how I know. It truly pales in comparison to this true experience of numinous. But it is a version of it, right? I will say that. But imagine being able to access this space within you, this feeling of numinous at will. A connectedness that is indeed supernatural by comparison to your natural being, your everyday default position. And then we discussed towards the beginning of this one, right, where we just being, and it's kind of flat and it's dry, and you're just living, you're just existing, and it's all default. Now this word numinous is the very word that Carl Jung used to describe his own experience with the divine, and he lifted the word from professor of theology Rudolf Otto. He felt that there was a need for a specialized word to describe the concept of holy without the moral factor, without moral factor. I think that's kind of interesting, right? Because most people feel like there's got to be, you're not allowed to feel that space unless you've been morally correct your entire life. So, and I love how Jung defines it as a dynamic agency or effect not caused by an arbitrary act of will. The numinism, whatever its cause may be, is an experience of the subject independent of their will. The numinism is either a quality belonging to a visible object or the influence of an invisible presence that causes a peculiar alteration of consciousness. And, it was Jung's thinking that this is either a quality inherent to an object or an experience that comes over a person, often inadvertently. So what's happening here? So let's note some kernels of truth. There are many of these moments, feelings, and numinousness. They come unbidden, or as Jung calls out, inadvertently. In physical nature, this is what you may call, to me, this is what one reference point is kind of like when you're hitting your stride. Again, going back to flow, it's a similar feeling, but not 100% the same. And let me see, I can't remember if I get to that or not. So, and this is, again, I'm saying that so that you understand that that's kind of the sensation, or somewhat of a state of ecstasy, right? So, but now you imagine this feeling coming over you, only you haven't been running, you haven't been dancing. It is a feeling, as Jung says, of all of his work with his patients, as though as he watched their complexities and confronted their unconscious, that feeds the hunger of the soul and provides feelings of liberation and relief. It's like this weight comes off of you, and you're relieved and again liberated, just as he said, obviously you can hear the struggle in my voice as I try to describe it for you, but what I want to do is couch it for you so that should you ever find yourself feeling these things or in a certain way, that you're not losing your shit, right? That you're in a known space. And it's so well known that this is a feeling that it goes hand in hand with Joseph Campbell's work and emphasizes the call of the hero. And as Jung states, it's a feeling that, while ineffable, it's also, and I love this word, he called it inelucidable, right? It cannot be resisted. It cannot be ignored. And just like when the call of the hero is resisted, there's the refusal, the call. Refusing the call can certainly have grave consequences for both the hero and the wider world. I would always say, if you don't step into your greatness, if you don't share what's calling to be shared through you, there's somebody out there waiting for you, right? There's somebody out there that needs you to step into your greatness, whatever that means for you, right? That's the call of the hero. Then somebody else is being impacted because you're not acting, right? You can see heroes who have certainly refused the call in stories like Sodom and Gomorrah, where Lot's wife is turned to a pillar of salt for looking back. The burning cities after God told her not to, or of the medieval legend of the wandering Jew who was cursed to walk the earth until Christ's return as penance for having taunted mankind's Redeemer on his way to crucifixion. And don't get me wrong, guys, I'm just looking for stories to relate this. I don't know these stories myself, but if they're speaking to you, and I hope that they do, those are a couple of the stories, right? But understand also that the refusal is generally human nature, and it's not final. The call will continue. It doesn't stop just once you try to suppress it for the first time. And you see this illustrated in Star Wars, which, for those who don't know already, is really when Joseph Campbell's work kind of came to light in The Call of the Hero, because that's the hero's journey. And we see Luke refuse the call at first, right? And he says, I can't get involved. I've got work to do, right? And he leaves, and his refusal to the call takes him back home, and he realizes that the destruction of his home, which he may have never even seen in the first place, had he accepted the call at first. Now, the refusal also seems to indicate like a humble nature, a fear of the unknown. For you're human, right? Sometimes if you don't heed that call, or have to overcome that fear, that initial fear, then some people may see you as arrogant or maybe oblivious, or maybe even dumb. I don't know, right? But I'm going to use pieces of my own story. My first podcast, it was scary. First time going to release, to reach out to and talk to people, it was terrifying. I had no idea what would even come out, and I had no idea whose lives I could or would touch or impact, let alone my own. So if you do continue to refuse, there's the regret that you always hear people talking about on their deathbed, that they regret that they didn't do X, Y, or Z, or they never tried to do more, they didn't live more, spend more time with their family, go to that baseball game, kiss that girl, do whatever, right? You have this life of regret because you're not giving in to this impelling force within you that is life. But we'll get back to Jung here. And he noticed that when he was talking to those who ignored this call, things started to go badly, eventually leading to physical symptoms as the self, that is the internal self, continues to try to get the individual's attention. The sensation of flow, as I stated at first, is very similar. It's unbidden, but there are many ways to find yourself in this state of flow. Now, if you can recognize the state of flow and the way that it has entered your life, you now have this what I'd like to call a keyhole that you can look through and to what this feeling is like. Now, the next aspect of this numinous feeling, it's a challenge to time it, right? You don't know exactly when it's coming, because it comes inadvertently, right? You don't know when it's going to come. However, I want you to be able to recognize it, like I keep saying, for what it is when it shows up. Or, again, if it has already shown up and maybe you've done your damnedest to dismiss it, know that it will not disperse without your attempting to shut it down through unnatural ways, through drugs, through drinking, through whatever, suppression, escapism, all of these things. To me, it's also what many will call an awakening, a rebirth, a resurrection. And I love how psychoanalyst Alfred Graf Durkheim states it. Just because, right, he states it like this: let us not forget that an experience of awakening does not create an awakened person. The door is open towards the mystery within. You are on the path of initiation, but it is a beginning, not an end. And should you finally decide to accept, you will with time gradually integrate matter and spirit, and you will integrate matter and spirit. Otherwise, the disconnected human psyche, and you'll be able to, with practice, in meditation, chanting, reading, martial arts, you'll be able to sit in this numinous space. You heard through this podcast of flow, right? Which is quite similar to the numinous state. And you also heard the call of the hero. If you've experienced flow states, you're on the precipice, right? And if you can recognize what puts you into flow states, you're not too far off, in my opinion, and from my own experience, of the numinous, right? And would you say that maybe, I would say that you can experience them at will. I mean, these are yogis. I'm not saying that this is not, I can't say at this point in my life that, that's Satori or Nirvana. Nirvana means to kind of like blow out your head, right? Blowing your mind is one of the states. So I think that that's possible. Have you found yourself in a numinous state? Have you had a hero's call, an awakening, a rebirth? And again, I share all this because if you have felt the touches, the tinges of any of this, and you feel like you might be going crazy, you feel like you might be losing your shit, you feel like this is a midlife crisis, you feel like you're in a crux or a situation, I disagree. Carl Jung disagrees. Joseph Campbell disagrees. There's many, 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 many others out there who would disagree. This is your state of being that's kind of being awoken, your life force within, looking to expand beyond the constraints, right? So I want to hear if you've had a hero's call. I want to hear if you've had an awakening, and shoot me an email at Brandon at where do I exist? Brandon at spiritualdope.co. I hope you've enjoyed this word numinous as much as I have.